Tomato-few vegetables have a more dramatic history than the tomato, and technically, it is a fruit, though the United States Supreme Court ruled it a vegetable in 1893 for trade purposes. Originally cultivated by the Aztecs in Mexico around 700 AD, it arrived in Europe in the 1500s where Italians called it pomodoro, meaning golden apple. For nearly 2 centuries, much of Europe believed it was poisonous. Today, the world produces over 180 million tons of tomatoes annually. They are about 95% water, which gives them that juicy burst when bitten into, and their deep umami flavor comes from glutamate, the same compound found in aged cheese and soy sauce. Zucchini. Most people think of zucchini as a Mediterranean vegetable, and they are not entirely wrong, but it was actually developed in northern Italy in the late 1800s from squash varieties that had been brought over from the Americas by Spanish explorers. The name comes from the Italian word zucca, meaning gourd. It grows extraordinarily fast, sometimes gaining an inch per day in peak summer heat. Raw, it has a mild, slightly grassy flavor with a crisp texture. Cooked, it becomes soft and almost buttery. It is one of the most productive plants a home gardener can grow, often producing far more than a single household can use between June and August. Bell pepper. Bell peppers belong to the Capsicum annuum species and were domesticated in Mexico and Central America at least 6,000 years ago. Unlike their spicy relatives, bell peppers carry a recessive gene that blocks capsaicin production entirely, giving them zero heat on the Scoville scale. Green bell peppers are simply unripe versions of red, yellow, or orange ones. A fully ripened red bell pepper contains nearly 3 times more vitamin C than an orange. They were introduced to Europe by Christopher Columbus in the late 1400s and spread rapidly through Spain and Portugal. Today, China produces over 40% of the global supply, but they remain deeply tied to summer cooking worldwide. Corn, or maize, has one of the most remarkable transformation stories in food history. Wild grass called teosinte, native to southern Mexico, was selectively bred by indigenous farmers over 9,000 years into the plump, starchy cobs we recognize today. The cob structure does not exist in nature. It is entirely a human invention through generations of selective farming. By the time European explorers arrived in the Americas, corn was feeding civilizations from Peru to Canada. A single corn plant produces on average just 1 to 2 ears. Sweet corn, the kind eaten fresh in summer, was developed in the 18th century from a natural mutation that made kernels hold onto their sugar longer. Cucumbers have been cultivated for at least 3,000 years, originating in the foothills of the Himalayas, in what is now northern India. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all prized them. Roman Emperor Tiberius reportedly demanded cucumbers on his table every single day of the year. They are about 96% water, making them one of the most hydrating foods you can eat raw. That cool, clean sensation when you bite into a fresh cucumber comes from that high water content, combined with a mild compound called cucurbitacein. English cucumbers are bred to have thinner skin and fewer seeds, while pickling cucumbers have drier flesh, specifically designed to absorb brine without turning mushy. Eggplant, known as aubergine across much of the world, originated in South Asia and has been cultivated in India and China for over 4,000 years. It reached the Middle East through trade routes and eventually arrived in Europe via the Moors in Spain during the 8th century AD. Early European varieties were small and white or yellow, closely resembling eggs, which is exactly why English speakers began calling them eggplants. Today, China grows roughly 70% of the world's supply. Raw eggplant has a slightly bitter, spongy texture, but heat transforms it into something silky and rich. Its flesh acts like a sponge for oil and flavor, which is why it is central to dishes like baba ganoush and moussaka. Green beans were first domesticated in Peru and Mexico over 8,000 years ago and were a staple food across the Americas long before European contact. They arrived in Europe in the 16th century after Spanish explorers brought them back from South America. Unlike the dried legumes humans had eaten for millennia, green beans were cultivated to be eaten whole, pod and all, while still young and tender. They are harvested before the seeds inside fully develop, which is what gives them that firm, snappy texture. Kentucky Wonder and Blue Lake are among the most well-known American varieties. Developed in the 19th century, they are rich in vitamin K, providing over 14% of the daily recommended value per 100-gram serving. Summer squash. Summer squash is harvested young, unlike winter squash, which is left to mature and harden on the vine. The category includes varieties like patty pan, yellow crookneck, and yellow straight neck, all descended from plants first cultivated in Mexico and Central America roughly 10,000 years ago. Squash was one of the three sisters, the ancient companion planting system used by indigenous North American peoples, alongside corn and beans. The three crops were grown together because they supported each other ecologically. Corn provided structure, beans fixed nitrogen in the soil, and squash leaves shaded the ground to retain moisture. Summer squash has a mild, delicate flavor and soft flesh that cooks quickly, making it one of the most versatile warm weather vegetables in the kitchen. Okra. Okra originated in northeastern Africa, likely in the region of Ethiopia and Sudan, and has been cultivated for at least 3,500 years. It traveled through Egypt, across the Arabian Peninsula, and into South Asia via ancient trade routes. The transatlantic slave trade carried okra to the Americas in the 17th century, where it became deeply embedded in Southern American and Caribbean cuisines. That distinctive sticky texture, something people either love or avoid, comes from mucilage, a soluble fiber that actually helps thicken dishes like gumbo. Okra is harvested when the pods are young, typically 2 to 4 inches long. Left on the plant, the pods become tough and fibrous within days, which is why timing the harvest matters enormously for quality. Basil. Basil is technically an herb, but no summer vegetable garden or summer cooking conversation is complete without it. It originated in India and Southeast Asia over 5,000 years ago and was considered sacred in Hindu tradition. It reached the Mediterranean around 1000 BC through Persian and Egyptian trade networks. Ancient Romans believed basil could only grow properly if you shouted and cursed at it while planting, a bizarre agricultural superstition that persisted for centuries. Sweet basil, the variety most common in Italian cooking, thrives in warm summer temperatures and bolts, begins flowering and loses its flavor when temperatures drop in early autumn. It contains a compound called linalool, which is also found in lavender and contributes to its distinctly floral, peppery scent. Radish. Radishes are one of the fastest maturing vegetables in existence, going from seed to harvest in as little as 22 days. They were among the first European vegetables cultivated on a large scale, with records of their use in Egypt dating back to 2700 BC. Predating the construction of the pyramids. Ancient Greek texts mention radishes were so highly valued that golden replicas were made and offered to the god Apollo. They originated in Southeast Asia, but spread westward early in human agricultural history. Summer radishes are small, crisp, and mildly peppery, their heat coming from glucosinolates, the same chemical family that gives mustard and wasabi their bite. Daikon, a milder white variety, became the dominant form across East Asia, and is now used in cuisines worldwide. Fennel. Fennel has been cultivated around the Mediterranean for over 2,000 years and holds a surprisingly dramatic place in mythology. According to Greek legend, Prometheus used the hollow stalk of a fennel plant to carry fire stolen from the gods down to humanity. The ancient Greeks called the marathon Plain Marathos, meaning place of fennel, because the plant grew wild there before the famous battle. Every part of the fennel plant is edible: the bulb, stalks, fronds, and seeds. The bulb, harvested in summer, has a crisp texture similar to celery and a flavor often described as gently anise-like. Cooking softens that anise quality considerably, making it sweeter and more mellow. It is rich in potassium and vitamin C and widely used in Italian and Mediterranean cooking. Edamame. Edamame are young soybeans harvested before they fully mature and harden, and they have been eaten in China and Japan for over 2,000 years. The word itself is Japanese, meaning stem bean, a reference to the old practice of selling them still attached to their stalks at roadside markets. Soybeans were first domesticated in northeastern China around 1100 BC and became one of the most important crops in East Asian agriculture. Edamame became popular in the United States, mainly through Japanese restaurants in the 1970s, and commercial American production grew significantly by the 1990s. They are exceptionally nutritious, offering roughly 17 grams of protein per cooked cup, along with all 9 essential amino acids, making them one of the few plant foods considered a complete protein source. Watermelon radish. The watermelon radish is a variety of daikon originating in China, where it has been cultivated for centuries under the name Xin Li Mei, meaning heart beautiful. It looks unremarkable from the outside, pale green with a white exterior, but when sliced open, the interior reveals a vivid magenta and pink pattern that genuinely resembles the flesh of a watermelon. It reached Western markets mainly through specialty farmers and upscale restaurant culture in the early 2000s. The flavor is milder and slightly sweeter than a common red radish, with a crisp, dense texture. It is harvested in late summer and early autumn. The striking interior color comes from anthocyanins, the same antioxidant pigments that make blueberries and red cabbage deeply colored. Shishito pepper. Shishito peppers originated in Japan and have been a staple of Japanese cuisine for several centuries, often served charred and salted as a simple appetizer. The name comes from the Japanese word shishi, meaning lion, because the wrinkled tip of the pepper resembles a lion's head. What makes shishitos genuinely fascinating is their unpredictability. Roughly 1 in 10 peppers in any given batch carries a surprising burst of heat, while the rest are mild and slightly sweet. This random heat distribution is caused by inconsistent capsaicin development within the plant, influenced by sunlight exposure and temperature fluctuation during growth. They became popular in American restaurants around 2010 and spread quickly as a casual appetizer. A 100-gram serving provides about 66% of the daily recommended intake of vitamin C.